Today is April 8th, 2020, and it's the day that I've been waiting for. It's time to make some new screens. So as you can see, got the coated screens back here. Nice and coated. They've been drying, so they should be nice and dry. All right, this is my first time trying Killer Creamery Keto Ice Cream. This is the Caramel's Back flavor. Never been able to find it before, but finally found it locally. Let's see if it's as good. It's been sitting for a good while, so it's nice and soft. There we go. It's creamy, but I'll be honest, it's not that sweet. I'm a little disappointed. It's not that sweet. I'm guessing maybe they don't use a sweetener in it. No, they put erythritol in it. Yeah, it's not that sweet. I'm really surprised. It's definitely not as sweet or as flavorful as the Rebel salted caramel. Sorry to say, but oh well. Maybe the other flavors will be better. One thing I discovered is that, my exposure unit is from like 2011, so it's pretty weak compared to the ones that are out today. And supposedly you're not supposed to use this emulsion with this small of an exposure unit. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. But this is the first time I've ever used the Cryocoat emulsion. I don't know why I can't say that. Cryocoat emulsion. There we go. This is the first time I've ever used it, so I'm going to be determining the time for exposure based upon the screen mesh that I'm using. The screen mesh sizes work like this. Like a 110 mesh means the holes, like if you think of the mesh like a screen door, right? And you have those little holes in the screen. So a 110 mesh, the screens are going to be bigger. So they're going to allow more ink to pass through. So they're better for your white ink and your thicker inks where you want a thicker deposit. Then you have like your 200s, your 230s, your 280s, and those are going to be for your finer. They're going to be much finer holes. So you use your thinner inks, like typically your black ink, or inks where you want to put down a smaller deposit or less ink, and you want a softer feel to the shirt. So if you want a thicker print, you use a lower mesh, 110 or lower. If you want a thinner print, a softer feel, you use 200, 230, 280 and up. So based upon the mesh, you typically expose for a different amount of time. So with this emulsion, you want to expose the screen to the light for a little bit longer time for your lower mesh counts, your 110, around those numbers. And then your higher mesh counts, 230, 280, 200, you expose a little bit less time. With my exposure unit, we're probably looking at somewhere, in a couple of minutes range, versus with some of the newer exposure units that they have out today that are much more high powered. You're talking seconds, 10 seconds, 30 seconds, 20 seconds. Mine's going to be a little bit longer since it's an older model, but that's what I got to work with, so that's what we're going to use. Okay, now since this is my first time using this emulsion, I'm going to use this 21 step exposure calculator. So it looks pretty simple. It's a film transparency like the ones you use for making your designs, but it's got 21 shades of black on it. And what'll happen is I'll put this on my screen along with my design, each time I use certain mesh of a screen. So if I use a 110, the first time I use it, I'll put this on. I'll expose it for the time I think it's supposed to be. And then based upon how many of these wash out. So wherever it's solid black, that will wash out with water. And that's where your design is going to be. So what happens is, depending on how many of those steps, then I can use this little calculator to get more, to add more time, to get more steps to show, or to get less steps to show. And as it says, you want to optimize your exposure so that when you wash out the image, you are left with 7 solid steps. If you see more than 7, your screen is overexposed. If you see less than 7 steps, your screen is underexposed. So ideally, we want 7 of these to be exposed when we wash out the screen. So that is how we measure it, and I'll show you a little bit more about that as we go, and I'll talk about it too. Screens are coated, but before I could actually make the new screens, I would have to make the design, the film transparencies. I've already made these. I made them last year because I was planning to move forward with this. So I've already made them. So I'm not going to show that step right now. In the future, I'll show that, how I take the design from Adobe Illustrator, print it out on my printer, and then I have my screen. But for now, see, this is my transparency. I'm doing 3 designs today, only one of which I can show you because you already know about this one. It's the logo, the word logo for Eternal Crown. I'm not going to show you the other 2. They are still a surprise. This is the design, and wherever there's black, dark black, after it's exposed, that part of the screen will wash out because the chemical does not get exposed to light, because the black ink here blocks the light from shining onto the Cryocoat emulsion. So everywhere where there's not black, it's going to get hardened because the light's going to harden it. So that's how you print your designs. I have my marks. Typically, if you're doing just a 1 color, all you need is a center registration mark. But because this is a 2 color design, I have my 4 points for lining up my other color. And so I'll print this. This would be like my white base, right? And then my color, which would be the Vegas gold, would go on top and overlay the white. And so I want the marks to line up. So that's why I have all 4 of those marks. All right, so I just went through my screens. I took them off the rack. I checked to see what meshes I have coated, and I also checked to see the quality of both the mesh and the frame, and then also how well they were coated. So then I made a list over here of all the screens that I have coated, and where you see the Q next to it, it means questionable. So either the frame doesn't seem like, like it's as strong, like the mesh might be starting to peel, or something with the emulsion, something got in it, it didn't coat cleanly. So that just helps me. Now I'm going to write down what screens I'm going to use for each design. Figured out what screens I'm going to use for what designs. So now I'm going to show you how I prepare the screens for burning. I have this registration board that I bought a long time ago, and it was more expensive than it probably should have been. But it basically gives you the outline of your different screen frame sizes. So here's a non-coated screen that I'm not going to use. So when it's in your clamps, see, it fits on there like that. And so that's where your board's going to be. And then there's your platen. Your platen is what you print on. And that's what you put the t-shirt on. So this allows you to line up where you want your image to be. I position it where I want it. I line up my registration points, the center ones. Those are the most important. I would tape it down, and then I would take my screen, overlay it on top, and then boom, it would be stuck to the screen. You always want it when you're, this is the ink side, the recess side is the ink side. So you always want it facing upright to you when it's like this, so that when you print the image, it doesn't print backwards. So that would be good, because I have enough room up here in the front for my, I like a push stroke, so it gives me enough room to put my ink here and push forward, and then enough room to clear out the ink all the way through the screen design. Same thing, I mark my center points first, right there, right there. Then I come over and mark the other registration points. All right, and there's another one done. And then I repeat the step again. So you can see my marks, shows me where to put my film. And I'll repeat it with the gold screen now. So now I attach my film. So this is my 230, this is gonna be my gold. I have it upside down, therefore I need my design to be upside down. All I do is find those registration marks that I made. I center my points on it. Make sure they're all aligned the best they can be. They don't have to be absolutely perfect, but the closer they are, the better it's going to print and line up with the other colors. If you're just doing a one color, it's not as important other than the center point, but when you're doing multiple colors, you want to get these as close as possible. So I just take little pieces of tape then and just tape down all four corners. And there you go. Now the screen is ready for burning. So when you flip it over, it reads right. So you know it's going to print the right way. And now I repeat the steps with the other. But since this is the first 230 screen, I would also take my step calculator and I'll just tape that on there like that. That'll help me to get the timing right. And I'll do that with all my screens when I do the first time. So that's all there is to it. Now it's ready to burn. Let's burn this screen. I'll show you how this works. So we are going to start with the gold one that we set up. It's a 230 mesh. So that's what I'm going to start with. I take my screen. This is a 230. So I'm going to lay it down like this. Make sure it's nice and centered so that the full screen gets exposed. Then I have this foam that I take and I insert it. It fits inside the screen to block out light from trying to get through the seams. And I take this piece of wood that I have and I lay it on top. It gives me a nice hard surface. And lastly, I take some weights and weigh it down, because I don't have a fancy vacuum chamber. Nowadays they have vacuum chambers that suck it down. I revert to old school, so I just put weights on top of it. It's my generic home bodybuilding setup, right? I do that. It keeps the screen flat, makes sure that light doesn't get underneath the print and mess it up. I don't use the timer on there. I'm going to use the timer on my phone. And since this is a 230 screen, I'm going to start with 60 seconds. I'm going to do 1 minute exposure and see how many of those steps we have left. Now we turn it on. See, it's lit up. We let it expose for 1 minute. Time is up. I actually was setting up in the other room and lost a little track of time, and so I did about 1 minute and 17 seconds. So that's what we're gonna say was our time. So remove the weights off. Now we take it and wash it out. As you can see, again, got the lights in here. that are safe to use. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my pressure washer and I'm just gonna spray each side of the screen, starting with the print side screen. You never wanna really wash your design out on this side because it's much easier to blow the design out, which means have parts of the emulsion come out that you don't want. So here we go. Spray it real quick, nothing long. I'm gonna flip it. You can see it starting to come through. That's good. That means it got exposed. Flip it over to the other side. Spray it again. Now, if you give it just a minute or so, it'll be much easier to get the design to spray out. You can see it starting to show up there. So that's good. So I'm gonna let that sit. This is normally when I would go back into the dark room and I would start prepping the next design. I would get it all ready. And then by the time I get it ready, I'd be able to come back in here and spray this one out, and it would spray out much easier. But for right now, I'm just gonna let it sit. Hopefully that was enough time, and also hopefully it will wash out properly. So now, just like when we were cleaning out the screens, you just start spraying it, and you just want all of that design to come out. It's looking good. Now I come in for a closer look to see. What I usually do is take it out and hold it up against my light. And I just look to make sure that it's all washed out. There's nothing in the design. See, there's a little spot there maybe in the end, but it looks pretty good. You want to dry your design. So the best thing to use for that really is newspaper. You take a little bit of newspaper, you lay it on top, and you just kind of go around and just kind of pat it down a little bit, trying to get a lot of the excess water off. You don't scrub it, you don't wipe it, you just kind of pat it. It just helps to get the excess water off. You're gonna flip it, do the same thing on the other side. All the corners, try to get as much excess water out of it as you can so that it's nice and dry. Once that's done, you take the screen just like the others, place it on your drying rack, and you let it dry. That's how you make your screen. All right, so I haven't used an exposure calculator in a while, but I went back and looked at the video, and it's supposed to be at 7 is where it should wash out to. So this means I overexposed my screen by quite a bit, since I'm at what? I would say I'm about 14, so I'm about 7 too high. So instead of a minute 17, we're probably looking at like 45 seconds. So I'll try that next time. That's why you use the exposure calculator. It should help you dial things in. And once you've done one of each of the screens meshes, then it's much faster because you can just go. You know the exact times, you write them down, and you go. So I'm gonna get back to it. All right, so this is what a perfectly washed out screen looks like on the step calculator. The number 7 is perfectly solid. 8 and below are all washed out. That's exactly how you want it to be. So this is a 230 screen. I did it for 15 seconds. So just to give you a comparison, my old emulsion that I used, that was like a 2-minute 30 exposure time for a 230 screen. This was 15 seconds. So this emulsion is way faster exposing. That's a wrap from the darkroom. Got the screens made, even made a couple extra that I wasn't planning on making, but I went ahead and made them. Now we're once again in the waiting process. Let them dry. If they dry and everything's good, then I'll be able to start printing through them. But there's still a couple more prep steps to do. Just check for pinholes, tape up the screens, that kind of stuff. So I'll be able to show you that coming up. But I'm gonna be busy probably for the rest of this week and next week. So I probably won't get to do the printing for maybe 3 weeks, but I'll be sure to keep you informed with that. But yeah, that is it. That's a wrap. Now we wait. Ridiculous. Just dropping everything.